Welcome to Journeys to Inspire. This is our fourth podcast in the series. My name is Zakia Gasimji, and I'm a co-founder of this platform. I have the pleasure today of interviewing Marilise de Villiers, who's also a co-creator of this platform. And welcome, Marilise.
Thank you, Zakia. It's so wonderful to be here. I'm so honored because this is such an amazing group of women, and to be invited has been a real honor for me. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Happy to have you. Okay, so let's get into it. Maybe tell our listeners, who are you? Who's Marilise from a personal and a professional perspective?
So I think if I have to sum up me in one word, is people lover. I think I've always pursued, um, you know, in my career and in my personal life, I've pursued, um, you know, ways to help people, to make an impact and a positive contribution in people's lives. I love hanging with my friends, so I think I'm very much like I pretty much started my career as well pursuing the people and change route. So we'll talk a little bit more about my journey, but it's very much, I think, people lover. Also, family is incredibly important to me. I have two beautiful sons, teenage sons now, who are, going through their stages as well. We're also in the process of moving back to South Africa after 18 years in the UK. So it's been a real roller coaster few months. I'm sure we'll go a little bit more into that and navigating change. But yeah, born and bred South African, spent 18 years in London, back now in South Africa on South African soil. I call it my roaring roots. This is home, and it's always been home, and I'm so happy to be back. And yeah, just loving life. My company is called Roar. It's my coaching and consultancy business, and I stepped out of my corporate career about 5 years ago. So I think, Zax, we'll talk a little bit more about that as well, because I think, very much an accidental entrepreneur. Was never part of the plan.
That's always how the best stories start, accidentally, I think. And I think South Africa is glad to have you back. So
Oh,
welcome back.
thank you.
What did you want to contribute to the Journeys platform? Or why did you want to contribute, rather?
I think it's because we want to invite and inspire more women at a much younger age, to be frank, to pursue careers in cybersecurity, tech and cybersecurity, to make it an attractive proposition, because it is an attractive proposition. And I think there are so many stigmas attached to, roles like boys versus girls. And I just think we want to really inspire more women. We want to make it accessible to everybody and to show that there's such a big variety of different things that you can do. I think that's, for me, is the big thing. You don't have to be technical. If you're technical, amazing, that's cool too. But you can do so many different things. And I think the future is definitely in cyber and tech. And we just want to bring as many wonderful, wonderful people into the industry.
That's absolutely spot on. And I think, you spoke about the stigma of roles, certain roles associated to male and so certain roles associated to female. Being a
Yes.
mom of two teenage boys, how are you navigating that?
So it's tough because I've got very boys, if that makes sense. So they're very stereotypical boys, and they play rugby, they do all the boys things. And I've got a very academic one and I've got a less academic one, but I mean they're very like clever boys. They're very independent boys. They grew up very independently. I mean, they've both been sort of going to nursery from a very, very young age, and mum and dad's always worked. For me, it's interesting because I think I always say, kids don't do what you say, they do what you do. And I think what we have in our relationship, my husband and I, so Heine is also South African. He's actually been in England a bit longer than me, 23 years. But also now coming back, and we're in kind of transition because the eldest son is finishing school in London, so we're sort of on separate continents as well at the moment, which is making it extra challenging. But I think the boys are very, like, they see parents who are very much in a sort of a partnership, in the sense that mum's always worked, mum's always contributed financially. Dad, washes the dishes, he washes the clothes, he makes food. So we have a very, I would say, a very balanced household. And I'm really hoping that that's going to inspire them and turn them into, men one day that would do the same things.
That's very interesting, and because you're very right, they watch what you do, not what you tell them to do, right? I think
Exactly.
all kids.
Exactly.
Okay, so you're a success story, and maybe you want to share a little bit about your raw journey and how you got here, and maybe manage the expectations of others who are on the same or similar path, right? So that's what Journeys is about. It's about telling your story to inspire other people on a similar path. Maybe share with us a little bit of that.
So I think what was a theme in my career, constant theme in my career, has always been that there was this expectation. So following the sort of the chartered accountancy route and having a very defined career path, and sort of my only option, I thought, was to become a partner in a big four consulting firm. That was always sort of the route and the path. And then, for 16 years, I tried very hard to fit in and to be that sort of, person that, follow that route. But then, you it's not like you're banging your head against a brick wall, but you come up against so many different obstacles and challenges. And it's not like you're not actually listening to the clues and the feedback. You're just like hell bent, because there's this societal expectation about the role. And if you're a career person, if you're a career woman, this is sort of, I was very much, this is my path. I wanted to reach the top, very ambitious. And even having my boys, having Heinrich and then 2 years later, Andreas, was very much for me like a tick in the box, moving back to work and sort of, back into career swing of things, and not necessarily
Like
allowing
following your
myself.
plan.
Yeah, not necessarily even allowing myself to be a mum properly, because there's this defined sort of route, and I think
Mm.
I was very lucky because very early on in my career, I mean, I say also you make your own luck, but very early on in my career, I navigated sort of out of accounting and auditing into people and change. So very, very early on, I knew that I wanted to be sort of the trainer in the front of the room, delivering like personal development courses, professional development courses. And I did become the sort of training manager for, at the time I was at PwC in the Western Cape. And then, of course, through a big company like that, you then get an experience to go overseas. So then I was in London for 2 years, which became 3 years, which became 4 years. Then life happens. So 18 years later. But essentially, what we have, what I've had was a really, really amazing platform. So the first 16 years of my career, an amazing platform, and in that time, I also was able to transition into cybersecurity. So after I had Andreas, the second time I went back to work, 2010, I just had a conversation with a colleague. So cybersecurity was then, becoming a thing. And he said to me, Marilise, it's ultimately a people problem we're trying to solve here. So we need someone kind of with your behavioral change, learning and development background, coaching skills background, to come and help us. And that's sort of when my journey started back in 2010. Kind of falling. I always say to people, I kind of accidentally fell into cybersecurity. And then, of course, some of you already know a little bit about my journey, but I then the more senior I became, the more I also then had to deal with toxic behavior in the workplace, and ultimately, I would say, met my menace at work, but a very, very toxic individual who ultimately, eventually made me leave my corporate career. It was about 5 years ago, to start my own thing. So that's how I accidentally became an entrepreneur, because I just could not navigate that environment anymore. I felt tired. I was on my knees. I was burnt out. My relationships with Honey and the boys was struggling. And yeah, I was just not a present mom, not a present friend, and just at absolute rock bottom.
I actually want to touch on two critical things that you've mentioned in sharing this story. So one, you said listening to the clues, and maybe it's that inner voice or things around us that we don't see, or we see it but we ignore it, right? And
Yes.
maybe just share what were some of those clues for you. That's the first part. And the second part, something that resonates with a lot of people I know and myself, and having a few chats around toxic behavior in the workplace, right?
Mm.
And what are also some of those signs, or what were some of those signs for you? Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I'll start with the first question
Mm.
around cues, because I think they're always there. And I think that's what I mean when I say there was this sort of set career path. There was societal expectations around, you do this, and then you do this, and then you do this. So it was never, and I, I honestly, I've had an amazing corporate career. Like, I've had amazing experiences, but it always felt a little bit like I had to try too hard. Like I was trying to be somebody that I'm not. I couldn't be myself authentically 100%. And I recognized that was down to me as well. But it was really that sort of trying to so hard to fit in, and everything felt like hard work. So it didn't necessarily flow. It didn't necessarily feel like, yes, you're passionate about something and you bring a contribution, but also often your ideas get sort of shut down, because this is the way we do things around here. So out of the box sort of ideas, which I often brought to the table, was sort of, it's too hard, it's always too, complicated. And there were all these little cues throughout the years, but it's not something that, as you say, that inner voice that we listen to, because
Mm.
also I think you get so conditioned in a corporate environment that, it's also about the survival of the fittest, in the sense of
Absolutely. How you navigate those, right?
yes, yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, where have you had to break through a diversity ceiling in the STEM field? Maybe in your corporate journey or in your entrepreneurial journey?
Yes, I think what sort of happened, and I'll also sort of just bring in the sort of the toxic behavior as well piece, because I know we haven't necessarily spoken about that. So I think it's when I became, and I've got to be a little bit careful about being too specific, but when I became a director, and I was reporting, to the boss essentially, but surrounded by a team of men, and being the most senior person in the room, but also being the only female in the room, maybe one or two other females, but it was, all of them reporting to me. And I think it was quite early on in my career, so I wasn't technical, and my background isn't technical, so I had very much this vibe around me of, colleagues, male colleagues that were very, um, you know, um, I remember one of them told me one day, you'll never be taken seriously because you're not technical enough. And I think that was for me. So for a while, I had to navigate an environment where, as the most senior person in the room, having to navigate very technical colleagues that I wasn't supposed to be technical. My role wasn't supposed to be the technical individual. That's why they were there. But the respect wasn't necessarily there because of my background. So that was quite, and I think it changed for me the day I started giving myself permission to just be me and to show up and to actually be very not unapologetic, but it's the fact that actually my role was not to be the technical person in the room. My role was to ask the obvious questions and to connect the dots. So getting really clear about my role and making sure that, you know, I can actually manage the team and lead the team because I play to my strengths.
That's so brilliant what you said, give myself permission to show up. And often we don't, but you actually need those permission slips, right? Um,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. What has been the cost maybe of your journey through your corporate career or your entrepreneurial career? Has there been any costs?
I
Um,
think I think the cost is very much I think there's an energy cost. So for me, I feel very overwhelmed at the moment. I'll be very transparent, navigating an extraordinary amount of change, moving countries, you know, new schools for the boys, building a house. We've just started building a house, you know, participating in a mastermind with my business. So there's an extraordinary amount of change that I'm navigating at the moment. And it's always been the energy cost for me in the sense of, you know, and it links to what we've just talked about in terms of how I show up, you know, and how I show up as the best version of me. Um, it's really about, you know, as a high performer, you get to the point where you get to burnout because you don't manage your energy. You don't put yourself first. And I think that would have been my most costly experience at the point in my career where I was on my knees, where I got to complete burnout because I was pleasing or trying to please everybody else and not looking after myself. And I think that was the lesson that I've learned from all of that is how important it is to prioritize you on your list of priorities, how important it is that I spend time in my day to care for me and to prioritize me and not necessarily just try and please everybody else around me all the time.
Burnout is such a hot topic at the moment because, there's so many things coming at you all the time. Again, with the change and moving
Mm.
countries and schools and businesses and all of these things. What grounds you? Or how do burnout or self-care is not a spa day.
Mm.
It'd be nice, but it's not
Yeah.
often you can take a spa day, right? What are those small moments of peace for you, or
Yeah.
how do you re-energize yourself when
Yeah.
you find yourself now that you've been at burnout and you recognize the signs? Maybe just share a little bit. How do you re-energize yourself?
Yeah. So for me, it's about re-energizing, but it's also about decompressing. So for me to decompress, I do a lot of breath work. I do really have to concentrate on my breathing. I'm someone that, you know, tends to get quite anxious and stressed. So if I don't breathe, I struggle. So breathing for me is incredibly important. So I have different types of breath work that I do. Um, on and off, you know, like this is also something which I think I'm one of those all or nothing kind of people, so I can also get really quite hard on myself, you know. So if I don't do it 100% of the time, you know, I it's like a, you know, epic fail. So I've learned over the last few years that if you consistently do it, so consistency is more important, but you do it maybe 70-80% of the time. So I won't say I do it every day, but I know my body well enough now know when I need it. I also love to do my meditations. I do at least 30 minutes to an hour in the mornings. That is absolute, I notice the difference in my day when I meditate. And then, of course, I always talk about my two non-negotiables, which is my exercise and my food, because it is about how you feel your body, but also how you, keep strong and fit. So yeah, I have exercise is a big one for me. Food is a big one for me, and then of course the breath work and the meditation.
I love the holistic approach that you have because, corporate careers or just any career journey is almost like an athlete, right?
Mm.
It's if you're running, or you need to prepare mentally, physically,
Yes,
spiritually. You need to have all of those dimensions full
yes.
to be able to give the best of yourself. So I really love what you're saying, how you're re-energized. How have you contextualized the challenge to overcome and show the power within?
So it's really about, and I've got a very vivid example back in my earlier career where I got feedback from a manager once about confidence. So the word confidence came up in the conversation, and he basically told me that I walk with my heart on my sleeves, and with my heart on my sleeve. And he gave me very unhelpful feedback around confidence and not having enough confidence. But he didn't also help me then to, like, with the how. So I, for a very, very long time, I had this complex relationship with the word confidence, because I thought that I felt confident and I was confident, but why was there this like impression that I'm not confident? So I realized that, probably for the first 5 years in London, in the UK, I tried so hard to fit in that I completely lost my confidence. And things like speaking English when Afrikaans is your first language for the first couple of years was a big deal. So you get flustered. It's like a silly thing, but it's a confidence thing, right? So I think what really shifted for me is when I became a little bit more like take me or leave me, right? So you either take me or you leave me. You can't, not everybody is always going to love you, right? And I think that for me has been a lesson throughout my career, and I keep having to learn that lesson. Maybe it's because I'm such a people's person, and I spend so much of my time working with people, helping people. I also have to recognize that you can't always like everybody. Everybody's not always going to like you, but you've got to show up in the sense of giving yourself permission to just be you. And I think that for me is a continuous, as I say, a continuous work in progress.
I
But
love
it's
it.
also these steps, we're all work in progress. We're just getting better and better and keep navigating it.
I love what you're saying because it shows reinvention. And, as we move through our lives and stages of just every milestone, you need to reinvent yourself, right? And just showing
Absolutely.
up and being you. So I love what you say, take me or leave me. I love that. Where have you seen the positive change?
In general, I think there are lots of companies, and I'm speaking more from a global perspective because I've got the benefit, of working with the BPs and the HSBCs of the world. But I'm really looking at sort of the top level management and beginning to see a lot more women coming through on merit, and I love that. I really, really love that. It's not fast enough. It's not enough per se, but at least we're beginning to really see very, very strong female leaders emerging, and you can see the companies that are serious about equity in the workplace because they make things happen.
It's amazing to be able to live through this change and see,
Yeah.
the deliberate effort. And you're right, it's not enough. And, that's why we're here as well, right?
Yeah.
Um, in working with these global companies or exposure that you've had, um, have you seen a pattern of a lack of change, um, in embracing equity, or have you seen the reverse of that?
So I would say I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. You see, and there's a direct correlation with company culture. And so, companies with really, really good cultures really embrace diversity and inclusion and equity. I think others less so, and I think that for me is it's ultimately down to the top level structure and the leaders and whether they take it seriously or not. So yeah, I think it's a mixed bag, but I think it's more positive than negative. I think the conversation has now been opened up. It's on the agenda. There's a lot being done in this space, and corporate and social responsibility initiatives are you know good
Hmm.
place. And I think it's, for me, I feel a good and a positive energy around it. But it does come down to your leaders in the organization and how they show up and how they lead. If they put their money where their mouth is, basically.
Where have you felt comfortable in this journey, feeling uncomfortable?
So, can you just rephrase the question slightly? So, have I felt comfortable being uncomfortable?
Hmm.
Oh, I think that's a daily occurrence now. I was saying to my hubby earlier this morning. I was saying to him, like, I'm gonna have to show up on camera soon, and if people only knew, if they only knew what happens behind the scenes sometimes, and how you also have, like, I have my messy middle days, and I'm just like, oh my goodness, you would not want to see Marilise today. So. Um, I think it's really just a case of we're all human. And I think the sooner we accept that we're all human and we all have good days, we all have bad days. And the more we start talking about it, but it is, if you're not uncomfortable, you're probably not growing enough. So the more uncomfortable you feel on a day-to-day basis within limits. I'm not suggesting you go beyond your limits, in the sense of, you want to still thrive, but that uncomfortableness is also a sign of growth. And so they say that if you have no idea how you're going to achieve something, like I remember when I decided to write my book. I mean, I had no idea how it was going to happen, and it felt like such a stretch goal, and it was constant state of uncomfortableness. But every day you show up and you do a little bit and you write a little bit, you get more comfortable and you get more comfortable. It's like a muscle that you practice, and that you develop. And so I think it's, if you have big dreams, if you have big goals, feeling uncomfortable is a normal feeling. And I want to encourage women to know that you don't need to know everything in order to apply for a job. You don't need to have all the qualifications. You can really trust in your ability to figure it out along the way. And I think that's what I think women, and especially us, that want to, like, this perfectionism thing that we have, we need to move away from. So really encouraging everybody to trust in their ability to figure it out along the way.
It's so fascinating what you're saying about trust in your ability, and it's that thing to let go and just trust, right, and have faith in yourself.
Yeah.
Trust in yourself. Is there anything else around Marilise and your journey that you'd like to share with our listeners for inspiration?
Yeah, I
that
think
we
for
haven't
me,
covered? Hmm.
yeah, for me, it's been a very I would say what's been a pivotal point for me in my life, and I love what you said earlier about holistic approach, because that is very much how I am approaching my life now. But one of the things and one of the lessons that I'm learning is about really, really leaning into asking myself on a moment by moment basis every single day, would I love this? You know, when I'm about to do something, it's like, would I love this? What do I really want? Now, when you start asking yourself questions like this, you know, like I did back in October 2021, and I realized, oh my goodness. So I was kind of looking at my life holistically, my health and my well being, my love and my relationships, my vocation, or I call it my roaring calling, and then my time and my money freedom. So you kind of look at it holistically, and I had all these beautiful things that popped up. But then I realized, oh my gosh, we're not in the right country, because all the people I love, everything that matters to me are actually back home in SA. And then you make big life decisions on the back of really leaning into what is it that I would love? You know, what kind of life would I truly love to be living? So forget about societal expectations, forget about the pressures, the external pressures, really leaning into what would you love? What matters to you? Finding those moments in your life that light you up, you know, those raw moments, as I call them. So I think it's important. That's been, I think, the biggest change in my life is giving myself permission to really, really lean into what is it that I want? How many times, Zach, have you asked someone, what do you want? And they have no idea what they want. And I see this too often. So I would love to see that change.
That's amazing. And I think, the flip of that is so easy to say what I don't want as opposed to what
Yes.
I do want, right?
Yes. Yes.
Um,
And
hmm.
that's okay. If that's where you have to start, then start there. What is it that I don't want? But then psychologically, it's important then to say, but what do I want? Because if you also focus on what you don't want, you also attract more of that into your life. So you've also got to take the focus and the energy away from that into the what do I want?
I
So
love,
psychologically, that's also important, right?
I love the theme of flow and energy, and a lot of what I've heard is consistency.
Yes.
Is what I've heard. What advice would you give Marilise 20 years ago, starting out?
I think I would definitely tell her to be kinder to herself. So kindness to self is something that I think is my life curriculum. I'm going to have to, well, a part of me will have to continue working on that, because it is something that doesn't come naturally to me. I set incredibly high standards for myself, sometimes impossible. And I think that whole kindness to self and self love is incredibly important. You know, so you can't love someone else if you don't love yourself. That's just the bottom line at the end of the day. And it doesn't have to necessarily be a romantic relationship. I'm talking more about humanity as a whole. So I think for me, words like self compassion, kindness, self love, it's all like words that really, really in my vocabulary is words that I have to, say to myself often and remind myself often. And then my other big word is courage. You know, have the courage to roar, have the courage to speak up, have the courage to go for that big goal and that big dream, and just know the what and the why. You can figure out the how along the way.
Beautiful, so eloquently said, Marlies, and I think your energy and your spirit really comes through in our conversation. So thank you for
Thanks.
sharing your journey and those words of wisdom and inspiration, and I hope we inspire someone. Yeah, we've come to the end of our session. So
Thank
thank you for your
you
time.
so much. Yeah, thank you so much. I really enjoyed it.